What started as a quiet contractual disagreement slowly morphed into one of the most unsettling K-pop dramas the industry has seen in recent years. Danielle's separation from NewJeans was never meant to play out under harsh public scrutiny, yet from the very beginning something felt off. This wasn't a clean break, and it certainly wasn't a simple misunderstanding between an idol and her agency. Behind carefully polished press statements and legal language, tension was building, layer by layer, until it finally spilled into the open. For months, Adore and Danielle existed in a state of unresolved conflict. Official updates were rare, vague, and often contradictory, leaving fans in the United States and beyond trying to read between the lines. While supporters hoped for reconciliation, insiders began hinting that trust had already collapsed behind closed doors. When Adore ultimately announced the termination of Danielle's exclusive contract and confirmed her removal from NewJeans, it felt less like a sudden decision and more like the final step of a plan long in motion. The agency framed its actions as unavoidable. According to Adore, repeated conflicts, alleged violations of contract terms, and failed negotiations made continued collaboration impossible. This wasn't presented as a creative disagreement or a clash of personalities. It was positioned as a fundamental breakdown of boundaries, authority, and control. When the courts upheld the validity of the contract, the message seemed clear on paper. The agency retained power, and Danielle's position within the group was over. But legal clarity doesn't always bring emotional closure. As NewJeans resumed activities without her, Danielle faded from official schedules, her silence becoming louder with each passing week. Fans were left questioning what had really happened behind the scenes and whether the ruling truly marked the end of the story, because in K-pop, endings are rarely that simple. If you think this was just another contract dispute quietly fading into history, stay with us. Follow the channel, subscribe, and keep watching, because this is only the beginning of where the story starts to turn dark. The controversy reignited not through a courtroom decision or an official statement, but through a single image that quietly surfaced online. At first glance, it looked harmless, almost reassuring. Danielle appeared away from the stage lights, participating in what seemed to be a charity activity, smiling alongside volunteers, dressed simply, far removed from the high-pressure world of K-pop. For a brief moment, the image felt like closure, a former idol choosing peace after a painful separation. But the internet rarely stops at surface-level impressions. As the photo spread across social media platforms, viewers began examining it more closely. Details that initially went unnoticed quickly became points of fixation. In the background, partially obscured shapes sparked debate. What looked like professional filming equipment, a boom microphone, and individuals resembling production staff raised uncomfortable questions. This didn't resemble private volunteer work. It looked organized, documented, and possibly produced. The narrative shifted almost overnight. Speculation exploded, especially among those already following Danielle's legal dispute. Was this charity appearance genuinely personal, or was it tied to a filmed project? In the context of her contract termination, that distinction mattered more than ever. Adore had previously cited unauthorized activities as a key reason for ending their relationship. If cameras were involved, even indirectly, it could reinforce the very claims that pushed her out of NewJeans. Reports soon surfaced suggesting the event may have been planned in advance and connected to a Korean variety production. Whether those claims were accurate or not, the timing alone felt reckless. With legal tensions still unresolved, even the appearance of structured media involvement carried risk. Optics began to outweigh intentions. What once seemed like a quiet step toward normalcy now felt like another line being tested. As doubts spread, public sympathy fractured. Supporters urged caution, but critics grew louder, arguing that this was no coincidence. The image that was meant to soften her narrative instead reopened wounds, pulling the controversy back into the spotlight. As the debate over the charity image intensified, a smaller detail quietly escalated the situation into something far more serious. Short clips and screenshots linked to the alleged filming began circulating, and viewers noticed Danielle referring to herself using the name NJZ. Under normal circumstances, the reference might have passed unnoticed, dismissed as habit or emotional attachment, but in the legal context surrounding her departure, it immediately triggered alarm bells. The court ruling had drawn a clear line. Danielle was no longer authorized to use the NewJeans name or any branding closely tied to the group. That restriction wasn't symbolic. It was a legal boundary meant to protect the agency's ownership and prevent public confusion. So when NJZ resurfaced, even casually, critics argued it risked misleading audiences into believing she still maintained an official connection to the group. Online discussions shifted sharply. This was no longer just about whether a charity appearance had been staged. It became about repetition and pattern. To skeptics, the name usage felt less like an accident and more like part of a larger disregard for imposed limits. Suddenly, the filming rumors, the charity controversy, and the branding issue began to align, forming a narrative that echoed Ador's original accusations almost too neatly. Supporters pushed back, insisting that context was missing and that short clips rarely tell the full story. But even neutral observers acknowledged one uncomfortable truth. Danielle was navigating a legal minefield. With lawsuits ongoing and scrutiny at its peak, every word and appearance carried weight. There was no room left for ambiguity, and no margin for error. What unsettled many was the growing sense that these weren't isolated missteps. Questions began to surface about whether warnings had already been issued behind closed doors, and whether this outcome had been quietly approaching long before the public became aware. The feeling that this story was spiraling, rather than stabilizing, became harder to ignore. As scrutiny tightened around Danielle's actions, attention slowly shifted away from her alone and toward the figures surrounding her. New rumors began circulating, suggesting that the controversy extended beyond a single charity appearance or a disputed name. Online discussions pointed to Danielle's mother being named in ongoing legal filings, a detail that many believed was not incidental but part of a broader strategy unfolding behind the scenes. Then came whispers of a much larger project. Allegations surfaced claiming that Danielle was connected to a documentary-style production centered on marathon training, reportedly alongside Sean, the same individual linked to the charity event. If true, this changed everything. A documentary is not a casual appearance or an accidental recording. It is a structured entertainment project, one that would almost certainly fall under agency approval if an exclusive contract were still being enforced. For critics, this possibility reframed the entire situation. The charity work, the filming equipment, the rumored variety connection, and now a potential documentary began to overlap in ways that felt increasingly deliberate. Even without confirmation, the pattern unsettled observers. The question was no longer whether Danielle crossed a line, but how many lines may have already been blurred. Adding to the unease was the resurfacing of Sean's own controversial past. Old photos connected to his charity circle reappeared online, showing individuals later exposed in some of the most infamous scandals in K-pop history. Although the images predated those crimes, the optics were impossible to ignore. For many, it raised uncomfortable questions about judgment, associations, and the environments Danielle was now stepping into. What once could have been framed as recovery or personal growth now felt, to critics, like a series of risky decisions made at the worst possible time. The sense that this dispute was quietly escalating rather than cooling down became impossible to shake. When all the fragments are placed side by side, the situation surrounding Danielle no longer resembles a single mistake or an unfortunate misunderstanding. What once appeared to be a straightforward contract dispute has evolved into a slow-burning collision between legal boundaries, public perception, and decisions made under intense pressure. Each new development has added weight to the sense that this conflict was never truly resolved, only temporarily contained. To many observers, the most unsettling element is not any one allegation, but the pattern that seems to be forming. Questions about unauthorized activities, blurred lines between personal projects and professional obligations, recurring associations with controversy, and the repeated resurfacing of restricted branding all contribute to a narrative that feels increasingly difficult to dismiss. Whether these choices were intentional or not, the consequences have unfolded publicly, under relentless scrutiny, and with no room left for quiet correction. Public opinion has shifted noticeably. Sympathy that once dominated early discussions is now competing with demands for accountability. Viewers are no longer asking what went wrong in a single moment, but how judgment, timing, and responsibility intersected over months behind closed doors. And with legal action still active, this story shows no signs of slowing down. If anything, it feels like the foundation has been laid for an even more explosive chapter ahead. In the K-pop industry, image is currency, silence is strategy, and timing is everything. Danielle's case sits at the uncomfortable intersection of all three, and as more details surface, the line between victim of circumstance and architect of her own downfall grows increasingly blurred. If you want to stay ahead of where this story is heading, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share your thoughts in the comments. this drama is far from over, and what comes next could change everything.